Today, as you have written down in your math notebook, we're starting a new chapter. And chapter 7 is all about multiplying fractions. In chapter 6, we learned how to add and subtract fractions. And so chapter 7 will be all about multiplying fractions. Okay. We also know that multiplication is the same as, with the quiet answer hand, Soham, repeated addition. So you can see why we would first learn how to add fractions and then learn how to use multiplication as a simpler way to repeatedly add fractions. Okay. Today, your chapter 7.1 is all about finding part of a group. Okay, if you have a whole number, we're going to find a fraction of that whole number. Find a part of that group. Your learning goal is to be able to model, or to use a model to find the fractional part of a group. Okay. So for our scenario today, we're going to talk about Maya. She likes to collect stamps. Okay, she has 20 stamps currently in her collection. 4/5 of those stamps have been canceled, meaning when you put a stamp on a letter, you know how when you receive the letter, there's a mark on top of the stamp? That means that stamp has been canceled, meaning you can't use the stamp again because it's already been used. Okay. So out of her 20 stamps, 4/5 of them have that mark on them that mean that they have been canceled. How many of the stamps in Maya's collection have been canceled? Okay, well, of course, just like any word problem, the first thing we need to do is figure out what is the question asking. Harshita? Right, we want to figure out how many of her stamps in her whole collection have that mark on them that say that they have been canceled. What is the important information we need in order to figure that out? Soham? Right, so we know that she has 20 stamps altogether, and 4/5 of those stamps have been canceled. So to figure out how the number of stamps that have been canceled, we need to find 4/5 of 20. Okay, so we're finding 4/5 of 20. Now today we're using modeling, which means we're going to draw a diagram. So the first thing you could do is draw 20 stamps. Okay, so go ahead in your notebook, draw 20 stamps. I drew them as circles because it's easier for me to draw circles to represent Maya's 20 stamps. This model does not represent 2/5 of 15. One of these circles, that represents one out of how many groups? So this is 1/3 of 15. So what have I circled here? What fraction of 15 have I circled here in blue? Ariel? 2/3, right? So that's 1/3, and this is 1/3. So what I've done here is I've modeled 2/3 of 15. Which is wonderful. This tells us that 2/3 of 15 is how many? Oops. Of 15 is how many? 10. Which is great. Unfortunately, not what the problem is asking, right? The problem is asking us what? 2/5. So we have to be careful. Now remember, we divided them into fifths. This represents how much? 1/5. And if I circle another group, that represents? 2/5. Right, another fifth. So this represents 2/5 of 15, okay, which is 6. Excellent. All right, ladies and gentlemen, great discussion. So we're trying to find 4/5 of these 20 stamps. So how many groups do we want to divide these stamps into? Siddharth?
Groups of 5.
Why do we want to divide them into 5 groups?
Because the denominator is 5.
Well, I can see, you're right, the denominator of 4/5 is 5. But why does that mean that we want to divide these 20 stamps into 5 groups? Why?
Usually when you're talking about fractions, always how many groups there are. So maybe if we circle groups of 5, and then we cancel out 4 from every group, we'll find out how many stamps have been canceled.
Well, we're trying to divide them into 5 groups because we want to find how many are in 4 of those 5 groups. 4/5 is 4 in 5 groups. Okay, so let's take your 20 stamps now, and let's move them into these 5 groups. So each of these, go ahead and draw yourself 5 groups, like I have 5 groups here, and then go ahead and move your circles, your stamps, so that they're evenly divided amongst those 5 groups. So now I've shared my 20 stamps equally amongst those 5 groups. Okay, Each group represents what percentage of the stamp, or what fraction of the stamps? Liam?
4/5.
Each group, this one group represents 4/5?
It represents 1/5.
Right, because I divided them into 5 groups, and so one group represents 1/5 of the stamps. Go ahead and write that down. You can draw an arrow. You can say this is 1/5 of the stamps. So if one group there represents 1/5 of the stamps, what would 2 groups represent? 2/5. 3 groups would represent 3/5. And 4 groups would represent 4/5. And of course 5 groups would represent how many fifths of the stamp? All of the stamps, or 5/5, right? Now to solve Maya's problem, what fraction of her stamps have been canceled? 4/5. So how many groups of the stamps would we need to circle in order to find 4/5? How many groups do we need to circle in order to find 4/5 of her stamps? Karan? 4. So we need to circle 4 groups. And how many stamps is that in 4 groups? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. How many stamps did we circle? 16. So 4/5 of 20 is how many? 16. We also know that this word of in math means what? What operation? Multiplication. So we also know that 4/5 times 20 is what? 16. So how many of Maya's stamps have been canceled? 16.